Quick heads up, this is actually a sequel video. If you're interested in watching from the beginning, a link is here. Thanks! Now that we've fully broken down Isle Unto Thyself, analyzing all the lines for its meaning, we can move on to Black Rainbows. This is the third song of Hawaii Part 2, and interestingly enough, it's the shortest besides the intro song, only running about 2.5 minutes. As a bit of a recap from last time, we have two main characters, the male lead, which fans have dubbed Simon, and the female lead, which I have dubbed Betty. In the previous song, they were invited to a wedding and traveled there. In my analysis last time, we basically broke down how Simon was unhappy with his marriage and wanted to make it better. He's hoping that a Hawaiian vacation is just the thing the two of them need to get back together. In comparison to Isle Unto Thyself, Black Rainbows is a much slower song overall. It's got a much more chilled vibe compared to the rest of the soundtrack. Along with the tempo change, the mixture of instruments really gives off a more Hawaiian energy. Like, picture stereotypically Hawaiian. This leads me to the literal interpretation of events as Simon and Betty are at a luau. For one, the instrumentation really fits, and two, it's a very common media trope for people in Hawaii to go to a luau, so I think it just makes sense. While Isle was definitely Simon's opening piece, Black Rainbow stands as Betty's opening song. She's the lead here, with Simon taking a backseat in terms of importance, but the relationship is still at the forefront here. With all that in mind, let's hop into the lyrical analysis. Similar to the backing vocals in Isle Unto Thyself, a singer with a deep voice is providing backup for this song. Translated into English, the Hawaiian lyrics spell out red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and purple, with ele ele, a different line, being black repeated twice. In terms of purpose and character connection, I don't think there's much going on here. All the colors together are meant to really just push the rainbow theming, in my opinion. I think it bears mentioning that if you combine all the colors together, you get the color black, but I'm not sure how that's too relevant. Let's move on to some more interesting things.
Do we remember connected rainbows?
This line has a pretty straightforward explanation in my opinion. The first thing that comes to my mind as a Westerner when I think of rainbows is the phrase sunshine and rainbows, which is really another way of saying peacefulness or happiness. So if we put two and two together here, Betty is asking if Simon remembers when they were both happily connected. I'm just gonna say it now, but these two words are gonna take up most of the analysis time of this video, like relatively compared to other stuff. Stella Octangula is quite a strange line, but it's 100% the most important concept to take away from this song. In Latin, Stella Octangula means stellated octahedron. Stellation is just the process of turning a polyhedra into a star, so in this case we have an 8-pointed star. Is there anything else we can readily connect this to? Well, there is one thing. Remember in the Isle Unto Thyself music video, where we followed Simon the whale the whole time? I said I'd explain that later, but I never really explained why Betty was an octopus. Well, an octopus has 8 arms, and a stellated octahedron has 8 points, so I think it's safe to say that Betty is the Stella Octangula. This makes a lot of sense in my opinion, because both the white whale and the Stella Octangula are what is used to market the album a lot. Like the whale is on the album cover, but the Stella Octangula is the face of the social media. It just makes sense to use two symbols representing the two leads and everything marketing the album. Let's move into the first verse now.
I see the praised rays, you see me smile. We know the joy beyond above has been here a while.
I believe the praised rays here are a rainbow. Not a physical rainbow though, but like a metaphorical one. Rainbows are often seen as bringing happiness and good fortune. And with Simon being willing to commit to Betty now, as seen with Isle Unto Thyself, it could be a way of her saying she's seeing good things to come. Rainbows are also composed of rays of light, so them being called praised rays makes sense. Simon then sees her smile, before referencing a joy beyond above. This to me reads as another reference to rainbows symbolizing happiness in their relationship. Rainbows are created when light refracts a certain way in the sky through water, which is why they tend to follow storms. If we consider their relationship before they went to Hawaii, an easy metaphor would be a rain cloud or a storm, and now that it's cleared, a rainbow can form. This is where the fourth line comes in. To me, it reads as her saying that their love had always been there. A series of circumstances just caused it to be hidden recently. Let's now move into the final section.
I draw the rainbows, you draw them near, and lo, the hues arranged to show it's perfectly clear.
Lines 1 and 2 definitely show how the two of them have reconnected in some way. You draw them near could be them both internalizing this happiness. I'm not too sure. I'm not 100% certain, but that's my best guess. In line 3, they use the word lo. The use of the word spelled L-O suggests that they're observing something spectacular. Using the word hue definitely makes it the rainbow, or at least the metaphorical rainbow of their happiness. Going back to the storm metaphor, it's perfectly clear could be a reference to clear skies. And as I mentioned earlier, rainbows can only really form when the sky is clear and light can refract off of water, which all combines together to really say that their love is spectacular. Well, the song so far has been pretty straightforward. There's one small thing I need to talk about. Behind two different parts of the song, the backing vocals say ele ele, which might imply there are some dark undertones to those parts. It's used behind Stella Octangula and I Draw the Rainbows. To me, the very obvious twisting of this part is with the line you draw them near. Only 2 songs from now, a murder is going to happen. And we could say that Simon's wedding invitation was what drew them closer to a murderer. So in a weird way, Simon drew the killer near to them. I guess you could also say it's perfectly clear could be backwards, and things are not clear at all. The other use behind Stella Octangula, I'm going to bring up a little later. So yeah, that was all the lyrics in this song. Much less to go over this time. Let's just wrap up some aspects I didn't cover. Firstly, the reason behind the name. Isle Unto Thyself was pretty obviously about being alone, and with the use of black earlier as a way to twist our lyrics, we could say the happiness of the rainbow has something hidden about it. In my opinion, that would be Betty's eventual death. Secondly, is there any reason why we put rainbows and Hawaii together here? Well, according to the Smithsonian, rainbows in Hawaiian culture represent a bridge between Earth and heaven. We know that she dies, and she's also represented by the star. I want to run through the song again, but from a different perspective. One where we look at the religious and spiritual side of things, especially in relation to heaven. Heaven is another incredibly important aspect going forward. There's a whole song later about it. Let's go over some of these lyrics again. I didn't mention it in my first pass through. The colors of this section are more so being chanted and less sung. This creates some imagery of a religious ceremony. With rainbows being a bridge to heaven, the chanting of the different colors could be the creation of said bridge. Remember that Betty's going to die soon, which is only in a couple days in the timeline, so the creation of a rainbow here absolutely works as a reference to her death. We've already determined that Betty is the Stella Octangula as referenced in the music video, but how does the more celestial interpretation tie into this? Well, a really obvious one would be incorporating a later song into our analysis. Space Station Level 7, the song with mainly Japanese lyrics, is a pretty explicit reference to heaven. I'll get more into that when I get to that song specifically, but think, what is space filled with? Space is full of stars, obviously, and if Betty is the star, that has some implications. Why specifically is she a Stella Octangula, though? The most basic interpretation would be that Betty's Jewish, seeing as a 2D representation of the shape would be a Star of David, but that's a little reductive in my opinion. There's one other thing the Stella Octangula is known for. It's the second step in creating one of the most famous fractals of all time. If you're unfamiliar with a fractal, it's a shape with a finite area but an infinite parameter. Most famously, if you zoom into the edge, it'll keep repeating forever and forever. What's the name of this fractal? The Koch snowflake. This is one of the earliest fractals we've ever found, and if you might have noticed, it has snowflake in the name. If you recall, the first song on the album was actually called Introduction to the Snow. The only other reference to snow was in Dream Suite in C major, which is the last song on the album. It's very interesting to think that the only references to snow are in the first, last, and this song, but the reference to snow here is only through an infinitely repeating sequence. It makes you wonder what snow in the other songs might imply. Something else to consider, if you skip Introduction to the Snow, Black Rainbows becomes the second song on the album. For more complicated reasons, I'll explain why I skipped it at a later point, but to me, the true second song of the album is Black Rainbows, and there's a very obvious allusion to the second step of the Coke Snowflake, a fractal, in this song. So something is repeating here, but we don't know what. And if you were wondering, this is what I was talking about when referring to the dark aspect of the Stella Octangula.
I draw the rainbows, you draw them near, and lo, the hues arranged to show it's perfectly clear.
This is the last line I'm going to analyze, and the only really thing I can glean from it is I draw the rainbows, which seems to be a reference to the creation of a bridge to heaven. All stuff we've previously covered, and all stuff you could probably connect on your own, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention it. And with all that squared away, let's move on to the core theme of the song. Black Rainbows, being the shortest song, aside from the introduction obviously, has a much harder interpretation to gather. We only have about 5 stanzas to go off of, but this is my best interpretation going off of the realistic and the heavenly aspects, and that theme is reconnection. Obviously, you have Simon and Betty being reconnected through their date and falling back in love again, but the reconnection to heaven with a rainbow bridge also ties into this idea. But why reconnection for the heavenly aspect? Well, that has to do with the fractal. It feels like an odd detail to include if there isn't some sort of repeating aspect to your story. There is definitely something on that front, and I will get to it, but let's just keep that in the back of our minds for now. So that's going to be the end of this video. If you enjoyed my analysis and want to see part 3, then why not hit subscribe? That'll be coming hopefully sooner than the last one I made, so keep on the lookout for my uploads. Next time we will be tackling White Ball, the last happy song before things take a sharp nosedive.